Welcome to the After Work Hangout, the podcast where you'll hear why and how everyday people shifted their careers to meet their personal needs. I'm your host, Crystal Lee. As a career coach of over 10 years, I love to engage in real talk about work and life. In Season 1, we'll chat honestly about work and money. You might be surprised by the underlying factors that have led to different career and financial decisions. So listen, get inspired, and make the moves that are right for you. Morgan, welcome to the After Work Hangout. I'm so happy to have you join our episode today.
Me too. I'm so excited to be here, Crystal. Thank you so much for inviting me.
To share a quick introduction about Morgan Chojnacki has over 20 years of experience writing for the tech and nonprofit sectors and also brings a wealth of experience supporting vulnerable communities. And currently she's working as a registered clinical counselor. So Morgan, something I love to do is to actually hear from folks themselves. How would you describe what is it like to be a registered clinical counselor? What is your job?
Well, I support people who are going through a wide range of life transitions, whether it's the end of a relationship or career transition, grief or loss, or a general sense of being stuck and overwhelmed. So I have a relational, trauma-informed, grounded approach where I really take into account each person's familial and cultural and community context. And I work with folks across the lifespan from young adults to people in their 70s, including the LGBTQIA+ communities. And I'm often supporting people and explore self-worth, questions of identity, boundaries. And I work with folks who are navigating really complex issues in their relationships, like narcissistic, antagonistic, emotionally abusive relationships. And at the foundation of my approach is I really incorporate somatic practices which strengthen that mind-body connection. And that includes things like breath work and mindfulness and eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Not sure if you've heard of it, but it's called EMDR. And it really helps folks process distressing and traumatic experiences and reconnect with that sense of safety and a sense of self.
Awesome. And, it sounds like, it's such a special and meaningful career. And I've known you for a few years now. We actually met during the pandemic. Our paths crossed when we were working in the nonprofit sector. And you were kind of going through that transition of entering this field because this is a newer career for you. I know from your bio, you worked in tech and nonprofits and social enterprise, doing a lot of writing, which feels to me as an outsider quite different from being a counselor. So how did that happen? Was there something that prompted the change? If you're able to kind of paint a story of how you did that for many years and transitioned to counseling, that'd be really interesting.
All right. So I started my career in tech writing, which was already a jump from what I had done at university, which was studying things Russian and Soviet politics and culture and language. And so that was already a leap. But the thing that really pulled me to do technical writing was the writing part. And I found ease. I found technology really fun. And so I thought, well, I've done my previous studies. I've done that to my satisfaction. I've learned a lot about those areas that I was really curious about. I want to do something different. So I jumped into technical writing. And so that was the beginning part. And I was living in Ontario at the time. So when I came out here, I found a job in technical writing. And I started out that way. It gradually became a little bit of online help, writing some instructional materials. So it kind of expanded a little bit. I continued in the tech field and continued with my writing. And at the same time, I was drawn to different social enterprises to really support things in the community. Things like I jumped on to do some volunteer work on a queer helpline. I was really drawn to start up a radio show about storytelling, and it was very focused on women's storytelling. And that was a collective that I was part of here in Vancouver, and also a feminist publishing company. So these were all interests. These really fed my soul. So it was these,
Yeah.
yeah, two parallel things going on.
You know, I love hearing that because I often feel like folks feel so much pressure to find a job that gives them everything. But it's okay to have a job, which, you know, you can enjoy and, you know, get better and better at and contribute. But you can also have a life outside of work that fulfills you in a different way, which is,
Absolutely.
it sounds like what you're describing.
Yes, it was very much that. It was my work life was satisfying me in a bunch of different ways and paying the bills. And I was also getting some other needs met outside of work, which was that part of me that was really drawn to, you know, the narratives, like the publishing company and storytelling show, and the queer helpline was another part of what I really valued. So all of those things really fed me and fueled me. So I continued on both of those tracks. And so what I discovered eventually was working for corporations was satisfying in many ways, but it also left me a little bit with, you know, some frustrations and some concerns about, well, what are the superstructures here? What are the ways that I fit and that I don't? So I took a step out and I started doing some more independent contracts, business writing. I still did technical writing, but it was more as an independent
Right.
vis-a-vis the
And that way you can choose
yeah,
who you work with.
yeah. So I did feel like I had more options there. And then I was starting to evaluate, well, what are the ways in which this fuels me? So the independent choices, doing this technical writing, business writing, what are the ways that that really fuels me and really feeds my soul? And is there any kind of way I can connect that up with my pursuits outside of work?
Okay. Yeah. So at a certain point, you're like, okay, can I bring it together?
Yes, exactly. Can I bring it together? So my next step was really to step really further away from the corporate and business world and into focusing on, okay, how can I bring my writing into social enterprises? So this is what the next period of my career was about. So I worked for a number of nonprofits, still using my writing skills, still using the things that I had honed in the technical writing world, but more oriented towards communications, marketing in these nonprofits, you know, enterprises that I could really relate to in terms of their values and their missions. They really spoke to me, and it was really congruent with my ethics and values.
I love the phrase you use. You called it period of your career. And really, a career has lots of different periods and chapters and it flows and ebbs and flows. And so you really embraced it
Yeah.
along the way and made those changes. Because for some folks, I think it's quite scary, right? To step outside of what you know. So was there anything that helped you? Like just like hyping yourself
Yeah.
up for those changes?
Lots of things helped me actually. And, you know, at the time, looking back on it now, I can see that there were different periods of my career and that I made decisions based on, you know, different considerations. When I was in the thick of it, it was less structured. You know, it was less clear to me what was that it was a period of time. And yes, there were lots of moments where I felt like, what am I doing? And, you know, I was asking myself, what am I doing? Where am I going? How can I continue to support myself? This is scary. And, you know, one of the things that I'm so grateful for now and throughout my life, and certainly in the last, you know, couple of decades here in Vancouver, is the people I've surrounded myself by. You know, I have really, really dear friendships and friends who I can brainstorm with, who support the different ideas that I have, and I support them in just pondering, well, what kind of a life do I want? You know, what are some next possibilities? Nothing is necessarily too outlandish in the exploration. And I'm also very grateful that my friends ask really, really good questions. Really good questions.
You should share this episode with your friends as a thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, you're really emphasizing like the relationships around you. Each of us are shaped by them. And, you know, I can just imagine the opposite end of the spectrum. If you're surrounded by folks who are more fearful themselves, and they might say, oh, why would you do that? Like, you're safe where you
Yeah.
are, which would be such a different experience from what you're describing, where they're curious with you and they're challenging you with questions. That's really amazing. How do you find these friends?
It's a really great question. I mean, I've just found friends. I've found friends partly out of doing things that I'm really passionate about throughout my life. And so, sometimes I do that and I don't necessarily encounter someone and it's not necessarily a meeting of the minds, but sometimes on those rare occasions, it there's somebody in those areas that I jump into where there is a bit of a meeting of the minds, and then there's this, these tentative first steps of a friendship, and then that beautiful kind of blossoming that happens over time, and blossoming and over time, but also people that I can connect with. There's this blossoming of ideas that can come with friendships too, and the questions they ask, and the things that we share, the vision that we each hold for each other, that can be so not just inspiring, but also it's part of fueling that imagination and fueling possibility in life.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, you mentioned curiosity, and having curiosity and openness is something that I actually bring to counseling
Mm.
all the time.
Yeah.
There are not really bad ideas, because even the ideas that we come up with, I find it's coming from some part of ourselves. And we may not understand it in the moment. We may not understand all the parts of self that we carry with us all the time. But the being curious about it, being receptive and supportive of, well, what is that part trying to say? What is that part reaching for? What are the dreams? What are the scary parts? What are the realistic parts? How can we balance all those things?
I'm hearing like with these friendships really shaping you, how you've navigated your work and life. Like you said, it's not unlike the conversations in the space you hold now for others. So already seeing a thread there, maybe early stages of planting a seed
Uh-huh.
for your current career.
Yeah.
But I also want to ask, with our podcast this season, we're chatting about work and money. And
Hmm.
you said when you're in the thick of it, it doesn't
Yeah.
feel so structured, emotions are coming up. Like, did you have any ways you navigated the income kind of situation? Like, did you always have a really clear idea before you made a move? Like, how did you approach that?
Oh, those are really, really good questions. I'm not sure if I'm going to remember each one of them, so I might
Oh
need
yeah, general
reminders.
theme. Yeah, general gist of it.
Yeah, right. So just to go back to that period where I was working for social enterprises, I was working for some pretty large ones, and some small ones, and eventually I was actually laid off. This was pre-pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And then I learned that my father had been diagnosed with a terminal illness. And so I went back to Quebec because I had been laid off, and I got unemployment or employment insurance rather.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so I was with my father in the last months of his life, and that was a really impactful time. I spent it with the rest of, the other parts of my family there. And I had been thinking in recent years, I had been thinking of, okay, I really like working for nonprofits because of that congruency of values, mission, vision, all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
It felt very like it had integrity to me. But the framing was not quite fitting anymore. And I was drawn to the idea of doing more meaningful work and more one-on-one work.
Okay.
Now, working in nonprofits, that wasn't the work that I was doing. I was working in groups, on teams, things like that.
Okay. So that's really interesting. I'm just hearing like there was a layoff, that's an external factor that's outside your control. You didn't see it coming.
No.
But at the same time, it gave you this moment to breathe a bit. And it just happened to
Yes.
coincide with like a major life event with your father's illness. So it's almost like, wow, the universe put you in that position that you were
Yeah.
able to have that reflection.
It's funny, but I do remember you just reminded me of this moment that was very tender between my father and I, where when I finally got to Quebec, and we were kind of it seemed kind of miraculous that somehow my life allowed me to go there while in my father's last few months. And we looked at each other and we just shook our heads and he just said, "How come?" And then he just said, "It's a miracle."
Mm.
And it just felt like what you're saying, which is things converged
Yeah.
and put me in that place.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I being with him in those final months was irreplaceable and a complete gift.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm so glad you had that time with him. And that sounds like a moment you'll remember for a very long time. Very special.
Yeah, yeah, it was really special.
So you mentioned that, that planted the seed of wanting to work more one to one, but still doing
Yeah.
very values driven work. And
Hmm.
it's not like anyone can just hang up a sign and become a counselor. There's some training involved, there's going back to school and all of that. So
Yes.
going back to school also for some folks it means reducing income, or like there are things that go into that. It's a big decision. So was it something that you just like, okay, sign me up, or did you do some research first? Like, how did you approach it?
Again, really, really great questions. And I did a ton of research. So what really grabbed me initially, even before counseling, was the idea of working one-on-one. And becoming a death doula is what had originally drawn me to the idea of doing that. It was a kind of a precursor to being drawn to do
Right.
counseling.
I'm aware of death doulas, but could you explain it a bit for folks who may not be familiar with the phrase?
Yeah, a death doula provides non-medical support, so emotional, practical, and sometimes spiritual support at the end of life. And there's just so much that goes around it.
Right. It's like a combination, I think, of both that emotional support, but also there are practical
Yeah,
things as well
yeah,
that happen around end of life decisions, processes, and just someone you can turn to for guidance when, not all of us have been through the experience. And of course, it's also a really challenging time to have to think about all of that, to have someone there with you.
it is. Yeah, and there's so many logistics involved in logistics, not just technically, but what's the emotional chronology of a death? What does it feel like emotionally? What are the things to look out for when someone is dying? What are all the things around death that happen familially or among friends? How are the other people responding? How is the person being advocated for in wherever they are, in a home, in a hospice? What are their wishes? What are the wishes of a dying person? Who do they want around them? What kind of
Yeah.
circumstance, what kind of conditions do they want? Do they want sunlight? Do they want closed
Oh my gosh,
windows?
the list can go on. I haven't thought about these things, right? Most of us
Yeah,
haven't.
yeah,
And to have someone there to guide us.
yeah.
So, okay, so you were researching becoming a death doula,
Mhm.
possibly. And then what happened? Like, what did you uncover? What did you
Yeah.
find?
So I did a bunch of research. I talked to all my friends. Some of them knew death doulas, and I found a course. So I took the little course in Vancouver when I got back, and I talked to one of my close friends. She knew a death doula in the prairies. So I talked to her about what it was, what her experience was, also what her previous experience was coming into being a death doula, because it wasn't something that this person did out of the gate, out of school, for example. She had a bunch of other experience as a social worker in her case that she brought into her next step in her career as a death doula. And that's one of the things I learned was death doulas come from all walks of life. There were nurse practitioners, there were directors of hospices, there were volunteers who'd been volunteering in palliative care wards or hospices for like 20 years, for example, assistants of various kinds, pastors. So there are all kinds of people who became death doulas from all these different roads.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I really recognize, so part of what my research told me, or what it led to, is an understanding that the path that I had chosen, it wasn't an easy fit. I hadn't done, I didn't have years of experience working in a hospice or volunteering in a hospice or working with, death and dying. I did have experience in some of these areas, but not in the kind of robust ways that I was understanding that was kind of a necessity in order to be credible as a death doula.
Right. Okay. So I just want to pause for a moment because I talk to so many people and I always talk about the power of informational interviews or coffee chats. Like just
Oh,
talk to people,
oh
right?
yeah.
Who do the work you're considering.
Yes.
They're your best source of information. And they're often so passionate about what they do. They're happy to share their journey, how they enjoy it, how they got about the training, and so forth, right? I imagine it sounds like you got so much information, they must have been happy to share.
They did. They were delighted to share. They were really, really, yeah, they were absolutely. People like sharing their stories about how they got to where they are. Yeah.
So, as a part of that, like you went in with the idea, you talked to folks, and realized, okay, like for me to go on that journey, it would be a bit harder, perhaps,
Yeah.
because my experience wasn't directly related. So, was it from there that they made the suggestion you look for counseling as an alternative, or did you decide and uncover that?
They didn't make those suggestions. They just encouraged me to continue pursuing that work because they were excited that I was excited about becoming a death doula.
Right. Okay. Then you have to do your own decision making at the end of the day.
I did, and the kernel that got me thinking about counseling, there's a couple things. One is I had quite a number of friends who were, some type of, they were counselors or psychologists themselves. I've had counselor friends for years. And so it was in the back of my mind, even though becoming a death doula was in the front of my mind. But in having these conversations with death doulas and having these interactions with them, and I actually volunteered with a local place for a little bit. But anyway,
No, that's a good point to make because if you're not sure if you would like something, go find a like low effort or low cost way of testing it out, which
yeah.
in many cases is volunteering.
Yeah, that's what I did for a short while. So what I started to really consider is, well, I like the supportive aspect of the idea of being a death doula, but what if I extend that out to people who are experiencing the death of a loved one? And so framing it as, what if I support people who are bereaved or they're grieving or they're experiencing loss? And that could be somebody who has, for example, an illness, a chronic illness, a terminal illness, but it can also be extended to people who their loved ones. And so
Yeah.
so that really got me thinking like in a larger frame and thinking about counseling.
Okay. So, yes, that's another tool for folks who are exploring careers. See if you can find that core theme and see how you can expand it. Like challenge yourself to zoom out and what are other ways to work in that niche that really excites you.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. So that kicked off a similar process that I had done with pursuing the idea of a death doula. So I did a lot of research. Again, I talked to a number of my friends and the people I knew, did some informational interviews with them. And then I started researching. I thought, okay, well, this sounds really aligned. It sounds really aligned. And also, counselors, in my experience with the informational interviews I was doing and my research, they came from all walks of life. And I started understanding that my kind of eclectic path that I had had with my career and the different interests that I had at work and also outside of work could make cohesive sense as a counselor.
Right. And to really embrace that, you called it eclectic. So to really embrace that eclectic journey and make that be the added value and special sauce you bring to your counseling.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, so do you recall how long all of this took? Like, were you just doing informational interviews every day, or were you spacing it out while doing other things, taking this exploration journey slowly? What was it like for you?
It took about, I mean, it was actually looking at that period of my life, it seemed to be very fast. So the thinking about becoming a death doula, information research, the little course that I took, and then switching to counseling, same thing, information interviews, research, some thinking, and then also researching universities. All of that took probably about 6 months.
Oh, okay. 6 months is, when you prefaced this by saying it was really fast, I was thinking, are you about 6 weeks? No, 6 months, everyone.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
but for folks, I also want to say it's different for everyone. If you are working a full-time job, you're like taking care of family, you want to take it slower, stretch it out, that's totally okay too.
Yeah.
But for a really healthy amount of research, as Morgan described, 6 months is
Yeah.
moving at a pretty like swift pace there.
Yeah. I also want to say that initially what I was doing wasn't really visible to the outside world because what I was doing is just thinking and just reflecting on, oh, there was a really clear divide between my life before I went to Quebec in terms of this is what I was doing, working for social enterprise in my field. And then after I returned to Vancouver, it was like, yeah, I'm not doing that anymore. So it was a clear division for me.
Right. Yeah. And you mentioned as well researching universities, like training
Yeah.
programs. Okay, going back to school takes, energy and money. So
Yes.
it's not a light decision to
Yeah.
make.
It is not.
How did you approach that?
Well, doing
How did you
again,
choose a program?
yeah, again, doing a lot of research. The other thing is, I was, being in my 50s at the time, I didn't want to, I was looking for a program that was going to be a fit for, in terms of duration and, the whole application cycle that was going to see me graduate in a timely way, if that makes sense. So
Right.
I researched a lot of different universities in Canada. I wasn't interested in going anywhere else. I just wanted to, I researched Canadian universities. And oh, actually, you know what? I did research a university that I'd heard of on the West Coast in the States as well, but that proved, I decided not to pursue that. But so I wanted something that was relatively that where I could see the end in a relatively timely way. I was really looking at what are the application timelines. There's some very strict guidelines about application processes, and I was in this bit of an awkward period of I had missed all the deadlines for 1 year, so I would have to wait to apply the following year, which would kick me if I was accepted into the following year, if that made
Right.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I get it. Yeah. Yeah. There's just logistics, right? Like as a
logistics.
part of your research should
Yes.
involve as well the logistics of like program application timelines. What are your personal needs around your goal of when to complete
Yes.
the education?
The other part of that is we were just hearing whispers of this flu-like problem that was happening across the world. And we were just hearing whispers of things happening, people falling sick.
Mm-hmm.
And there was there was a lot of uncertainty, not just in the world, but in Canada that was starting to kind of mount and
Mm-hmm.
lots of fears that were mounting. So considerations around, well, in person versus virtual, that was sort of coming up as a potential concern. It hadn't hit, like the pandemic hadn't hit hard yet in Vancouver, but we were definitely hearing about places shutting down elsewhere in the world.
Yeah. I think many of us recall that very clearly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yes, so mode of delivery. Like,
Yes.
how would you participate in the classes? Is it in person? Is it remote? Is it hybrid? So, that can be a factor to consider.
Yes, that's right. Another factor is money. Where was the money going to come from, and how was I going to support myself throughout? So there's a lot of different answers to, where does the money come from? Savings, loans, lines of credit,
Hmm.
job. And at that time, I wasn't employed yet because I still was on EI at the time from having been laid off the previous year, but that was ending. So I had started looking for work at the same time that I was doing this research. And I was also trying to figure out, well, what kind of job can I get in a social enterprise? Because I was committed at that point to working in a social enterprise while I was going to school, because that was
Okay.
the closest fit to what
Okay.
I wanted to do.
Yeah. So, there are different ways, like you said. There is a route where if you go to school full time, that will have a significant impact on your finances.
Mhm.
And for you, you kind of weighed it out, decided, is there a way to do part time,
Mhm.
both working and education? Is that what I'm hearing?
That is what you're hearing. And what I discovered is that the school that I was applying to, they didn't really have a part-time option, but their full-time, you could take leaves between semesters,
Mhm.
but it was basically full-time with,
Okay.
a few weeks between semesters. It was set up in a kind of interesting way.
Okay. So, like, you're pretty brave. You're like, you're going to do this pretty much full time program and look for a job.
Yes, it was, I don't know if it was brave or so at some point, once I made a decision about where to apply, about a program that would actually fit my life, a program that also what was becoming, cities across the country they weren't locked down yet, but people felt like it was coming because other places in the world were locking down.
Mhm.
So as it happened, the program I chose was online anyway. There's pros and cons to that. And the job that I found, which is where you and I met,
Mhm.
the job that I found was part-time. And for the first quite a few months, I didn't meet in person anybody I worked with because of the pandemic lockdown.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like it probably took a year or two before you and I met in person. You were just like a Zoom, like square, a face. And then we met and we realized, oh, we're both petite and short. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So that's great. Like you went in quite intentionally about the type of job you needed in terms of hours of work as well as the values alignment.
Mhm.
And you did your program, which I imagine was quite intensive based on what you described. So it must have been such a busy period of your life. How would you describe it in hindsight?
Wow, how I would describe it, it was a very intense time of my life. There was very little else I could handle outside of work, schooling, and the pandemic, because the pandemic was affecting everyone and was one of the layers that was just external to life that I and like everybody else had to navigate around.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was just an extra layer.
Yeah, that was an extra layer.
I, I don't even know if this is the right question, but you can reflect back to me however you want to answer it. But given how intense it was it worth it to do it that way? Would you have done anything differently?
It was absolutely worth it. I really it's hard to say in hindsight whether I would have done anything differently because there were such wonderful things that happened as a result of doing the master's program. About a month after I started my master's degree, I found a wonderful place to do my practicum. I had an early interview with them, and so I didn't have to worry about that towards the end of my practicum, which I was
Mm,
I was super grateful for. And so doing the program and doing my practicum there has been, I mean, that the practicum was wonderful. It also was largely, significantly during the pandemic. So, mostly virtual clients, some in person. But, everything has led to everything else. All the different steps that I've taken in my career, in the things I did at work, in the things I did outside of work, they all informed the learning that I did and what I now bring to counseling. So I don't know if I would have done anything differently,
hmm.
even though it was
Yeah.
an extremely intense time.
Yeah. Ultimately, it's your journey, and everyone's journey is different, and that is uniquely yours. And all of that itself brings back to that special sauce of your counseling.
Yeah,
Well, congratulations, you made it. You're like
thank
fully
you.
running your own practice now. So
Yeah.
now that you're here, like what's exciting you now? Like what keeps you going and motivated and eager to get up in the morning?
Honestly, my clients, I love my clients. Like they're so courageous and they're so intentional and they want to do something different in their lives. They want to bring about change. And I love having like the friends in my life, they want to bring about change. They're curious and they're open and they explore their souls and their ideas. And that's what my clients are doing. These individuals from different walks of life who have, different issues that they've come across, different lived experience, but they absolutely are inspiring.
You talk about change and how these folks are so motivated to make something different happen. And with this podcast, we also want to encourage and inspire folks who are considering a change in their career. What would you say, as whether someone who's gone through a career change later in life or as a counselor, what would you say as that encouragement or inspiration for folks who are like, I'm thinking, I'm not sure, I'm nervous, I'm scared?
Yeah. What I would say is whatever the parts are that are coming up. So if there's, I'm scared or I'm nervous, I don't know, I'm uncertain, I'm excited about, I'm inspired by, like all the things that come up. If, like, I would encourage folks to stay curious and to allow themselves to go there, to answer them, and just to allow the answers to come, and to hold space for those answers, and not also to be super attached to a given answer. Because let's say I'm scared of being destitute. Let's say, if, like, oh my God, how am I going to make a living with this? I need a roof over my head, all that. So let yourself go there. Let yourself, vision that, because squishing it down doesn't really serve us. It might for a short time, when we compartmentalize things and put it on the shelf, that can help for a short time. But allowing things to have oxygen and to see the light of day, and allowing those thoughts to arise and the answers to arise, I would say that that's an important piece. And the other part is, at some point, it's still going to be scary. And, I hear this from different sources, this idea of, if you're scared, do it anyway. And that's not a, like, oh yeah, sure, I'll do anything scary. It's not that, but it's like, if you've identified these different things and you've kind of figured out roughly what you might want to do next, and it's still scary, it doesn't mean that needs to prevent you from taking a next step.
Oh, you said so many beautiful things in there. Something I also noticed, because as a career coach, I do work with folks where we're uncovering what are those voices that are going on internally, like you said, like worried about being destitute and how am I going to make this work? And if we are pushing that away, we might end up spending so much energy trying to push it away. And that energy could actually be used towards other things, like going for that informational interview, attending a info session, right?
Yeah.
So, but it does oftentimes require naming it first. It's in a way like a service to yourself to own it. And maybe it's talking to a counselor, maybe for some folks it's journaling, and no one will read it. It's just words on a page between you and your journal, right? There are different ways to go about it.
Yeah, definitely. It's that idea of name it to tame it, which is a phrase coined by Dr. Dan Siegel, who's an American psychiatrist. And it really highlights the power of identifying and naming our emotions as a way to support emotional regulation. And when we're more emotionally regulated, it makes us feel grounded and more in control.
Yeah, I know for me, one book that was helpful, also because I struggle with naming emotions, like coming from a Chinese Canadian family, we don't talk about emotions. Like I didn't have the words. It's just like all like, I don't like this feeling. It feels like, right? So a few years ago, I read Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart.
Yeah.
And then they did research on like, I don't know, like 70 different emotions. And so now I have that poster of all these different named emotions. I can go to it and be like, I think this is the one that I'm feeling. And Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of a training that you did.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
just a book, audio. Actually, I didn't read it. I listened to the audio book, but there is a free download.
Yeah.
Maybe I can link to it that I found helpful.
Uh-huh.
But there are also like feeling wheels you can Google,
Mhm.
and like maybe you don't need 70. Maybe you just need to start with 6.
Yeah. Yeah. And here's one sometimes that I use with clients.
Oh, Morgan just pulled out a really colorful wheel. I love it. Is it spinny or do people
Well,
just
it's spinning in
point?
my hands. It's
Yeah.
spinning. Yes, yeah.
Oh,
So
cool, cool.
yeah, there's the 6 core: fear, sad, happy, surprise, anger, disgust. And
Yeah.
then there's a bunch of feelings that stem from that.
Yeah.
But sometimes that can help, what you're saying about, yeah, some folks don't necessarily have a vocabulary for the nuances of what they're experiencing.
And that's okay.
Yeah,
Like, start from where you are.
it's totally fine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Same thing with
exactly.
any sort of career exploration. Start from where you are. Maybe, like, you're not quite ready to reach out to someone for an interview. Maybe you just read some articles online.
Yeah,
That's okay too.
exactly.
That's a first step.
Yeah. And actually, as you're talking, one of the things I think about, and this was formative for me in terms of my education in counseling psychology, but also in something that I bring to clients when it's a good fit, when it's appropriate. I don't know if you've heard of Dr. Kristen Neff.
No, tell me more.
She, okay, she has a website called selfcompassion.org, self-compassion.org. And she's written books about self-compassion, and she has done loads of, evidence-based research on self-compassion. She's not a counselor herself, but she's done all this research about how self-compassion can be something that supports us as we go about our lives, because we often have, I say we, I mean, I'll speak for myself, but this is my experience with my friends, with clients, with lots of individuals that I come across, and systemically also. It's this idea that there's a lot of self-judgment, self-criticism that we carry with us. And sometimes it just acts in the back of our heads. If we don't name it, then we don't necessarily become conscious of it. But once we start working with it and bring in some self-compassion, that can support taking a next scary step.
Mm-hmm.
And if it doesn't work out, doesn't mean we have to be down on ourselves, doesn't mean we have to excoriate ourselves. It can mean that okay, so that didn't work out. That was a fit. It's like, one of the things I do in the summer is I'm part of a garden co-op.
Mm-hmm.
So me and a friend, we garden together, and I have had crop failures, like
Uh,
definitely.
I'm a gardener as well. I know what you mean.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And there's of course there's frustration, and there's like, what did I do wrong? But ultimately it's like, okay, well, this happened, and what can I do differently next time?
Yeah. And back to the gardening metaphor. I love gardening metaphors. Like, you can't control the days of sunshine and rain and temperature. There's so much outside your control. What you can do is just show up the best you can.
Yes, yes, indeed. Yeah, for
Yes.
sure.
Okay, so self compassion. So this ties in with the question I have next. And I always like to ask this, which is, how do you recharge outside of work? Like, what do you do? And how do you, in your case, nurture self compassion?
A lot of different ways, actually. So I go for early morning walks on a regular. I get out of bed and I go for a little walk. So being outside, even if it's still dark at 7 o'clock, 7 or 7:30, I like to be out the door just for a little half-hour walk, just to breathe the air. Another thing is I like to move my body in different ways. So I take dance classes and I do social dancing. I find that really fun, very energizing. I'm laughing all the time when I'm dancing. And so laughing is actually part of how I recharge.
Yay. Oh, of course, you know that I lead laughter yoga, so I know the benefits.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So laughing is a big part of it. I'm going to the gym regularly. And, things like eating well. I really like good food, simple food, but I really like vegetables. I love to cook again, pretty simple things, not too elaborate, but I really enjoy good food
Yeah.
and spending time with friends. I recharge with friends. That's a big part too.
Beautiful. Well, also the vegetables go with your gardening. You get to enjoy
Yeah.
your efforts.
Yes.
Yeah, so lots of movement-based activities. There's both, sounds like solo walking time, but also a lot of being in community, spending time with folks who lift you up. And well, we've talked about the value of friendships throughout this conversation. So that's
Yeah.
so nice to nurture. Yeah, I would love to just maybe before we say goodbye, ask if you have any final thoughts for folks who are considering career change. I know today we talked about your experience being later in your career,
Uh-huh.
but just generally for anyone, any other final thoughts around navigating that?
hmm I guess final thoughts is this is something that I remember thinking about when I was still doing kind of the marketing and tech writing and was in that world. When you're noticing something isn't quite aligned, because I had some dissatisfaction with what I was doing. There was a kind of a core part that was like it kind of felt like I was internally a little bit rattled a lot. Just a little kind of kind of out of alignment feeling. Now I recognize it as a little bit out of alignment feeling. Then it was just feeling a little bit
Hmm.
off my center. So I would say if you approach yourself like a good detective novel, just investigate yourself. What are the things that your body is feeling? What are your senses telling you about the moment, about
Hmm.
what you're experiencing? Stay curious about that. And it might not make sense in the moment that you're experiencing it, but with a little bit of distance, a little bit of perspective, it might make sense. So stay curious to looking at what you're experiencing from a different lens.
Yeah, yeah. Such a great point. I often ask people to notice any body cues. Maybe, you're getting a lot of headaches from or like neck pain because you're scrunched up and stressed, or, your tummy's not sitting well. And
Mm,
I know in the past when I've had feeling off in jobs, like my eczema would flare up, just signs of stress. Your body might be telling you
yeah.
something. But in other ways, like I've also in the past been quick to like anger or get annoyed
Mm,
easily, and I'm short with like
yes.
people in my life. It's not because of the people in my life, it's actually because how maybe I'm feeling from my work situation. So notice all the signs, and not to judge it, again, like to say, hey, it's a message, what might it be trying to tell me, and approach it from a place of compassion. And I feel like any decisions and changes you make can be about giving back and loving yourself, and yeah, really
Mhm.
taking care of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, that resonates. That really resonates. Yeah, that idea that the body is sending information to the mind all the time. I mean, it's we're all one. We're one whole, but our system really encourages us to be up here in the head
Hmm.
a lot.
Yeah. And you can do it. Morgan did it. You can do it too.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
we've talked a lot about how, listen to your body and to honor what you're experiencing and to make changes accordingly, one step at a time. And also, that path can be a bit zigzaggy.
Yeah.
Like, no one says it has to be a certain way. What would your experience be like for that, Morgan, either for yourself or supporting others? I feel society might say, like, there's a certain way things have to happen or in what order, but in reality, it's not, right?
hmm Absolutely agree. It doesn't have to be a linear path. By no means is life linear. Things happen. They can happen in a really, like you said, a zigzaggy way. So thinking non-linearly might be actually really helpful. It's like, how can I bring in the experiences that I have in these different fields that seem really disparate, seem really like unrelated, And then suddenly you might land upon something that, oh, it ties things together. It's not linear, but it ties things together in a way that fits with your actual experience in your life.
Yeah. And in fact, you might not find that really cool thing if you went the super simple, straightforward route. You had to find it through zigzagging.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And also, like, you're allowed, like, no one's monitoring you. No one's like judging you or grading you or anything. So I think ultimately you just need to give yourself permission to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything else we want to say?
You know, I guess the other thing that occurs to me as we're talking about this, when I think about the trajectory not being linear, I also think about how is this new step or this new path, how is it aligned with my values? Because ultimately, I think, well, there is no ultimately, but any next step, I want them to be aligned with what my values are. Because something that isn't aligned feels off, makes me feel whatever, restless, unsatisfied in some ways. So really tuning into that part of self that is kind of feels rewarded by what you're doing and peaceful and aligned. That's kind of what I orient towards.
Peaceful and aligned. Those are
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
guideposts I heard are for you.
Yeah.
And for someone else, maybe the guideposts are like thrilling and
Right.
exciting, right? So
Absolutely.
you find your own guideposts.
Exactly. Exactly. Because your guidepost is uniquely yours.
That's beautiful.
Okay.
Go at your pace, but you can definitely make the changes one step at a time.
Yeah.
Well, again, Morgan, thank you so much for joining this conversation. Really appreciate you and all the wisdom you've shared.
Well, thanks for inviting me again, Crystal. And it was just, it's always great to talk to you, but it was wonderful to have this conversation.
Thanks for listening to the After Work Hangout. If you enjoy honest conversations about career decisions and life choices, remember to subscribe to the After Work Hangout so you'll know when our next episode drops. And don't forget to leave a 5-star rating while you're at it. You can find a summary of this episode along with more information about our guests and resources that were mentioned at relocal.ca. That's RELOCAL.ca. If you take a look around the website, you'll also find blog posts, downloads, and community offerings to support your career development. I'm your host, Crystal Lee, and I'm always interested in hearing what topics you'd like to learn about. You can connect with me on Instagram at relocal.ca, or you can email me at crystal@relocal.ca. Finally, I want to say a big thank you to all the guests and supporters who make this podcast possible. This includes my podcast manager, Lindsay Curtis, and graphic designer, Alex Dewar, who created the podcast art. Thanks again for listening and sticking around. I hope you're more inspired and ready to make the moves that are right for you. See you at the next Hangout.